Good morning. I wanted to talk about like displaced behavior, sometimes considered vices, but sometimes it's something simple like a self-soothing behavior that happens, and that's what a vice actually is. But that happens even as young as, a baby, a foal. Um, I'm curious mainly about the weaning process and what people's procedures are in the weaning process and how they affect the long-term mental health and emotional health of the horse. I met a horse that sucked his tongue when he was overstimulated or stressed out or asked to think about something that was new to him. And he would put his tongue out of his mouth ever so slightly, kind of like clamp down on it, maybe even with his teeth, and then he would suck on his tongue. And horses that do things like that, and I was told he's done it since he was a baby, so I'm going to go as far back as the weaning process that caused that. And I didn't ask, but I am curious to how that weaning process took place. I think some people feel removing the baby or the mom from the property at the time of weaning is like the easiest way for weaning to be done. And they don't, think of kind of the consequences of all the things that change, like all the things that change in an environment, like in a situation like that. Some farms do a very gentle weaning where mommies and babies are out together during the regular pre-weaning time. They're raised together, babies are playing with each other while mommies graze. And then when the mommies get taken away, the babies still have something familiar to them. They still have each other. They still have something that they were already spending more time with than their moms. They're already playing with their friends longer, more often than they were hanging out, suckling on mom. Then, it's less stressful. Like, there's still something staying familiar, just mommy's missing. And that's kind of like if in the wild, mommy gets picked off by a coyote or a wolf, the baby still stays with the herd, and it's traumatic, no question, but it's less traumatic than if mommy was picked off in the woods and baby was left in the wild by himself, not knowing if he's next and not having anything else familiar to him. So I'm curious if this particular horse was weaned in a much more traumatic way where, it's time to wean him, throw him on a trailer, take him from anything familiar to him and move him someplace completely new. And even if the person he was moved to is going to love him to a million pieces and take super duper care of him, it doesn't change his emotional trauma of nothing familiar in a blink of an eye. So some horses, become very fearful. Some horses find other things to do, such as sucking on their tongue, walking in circles. It's a little young for the cribbing and it's a little young for the weaving, but the weaving I think would be something you could probably even see in youngsters. Those vices are usually started as a result of being locked up in a stall, but not necessarily at the weaning process. So it's just like a lot of racehorses crib, a lot of racehorses weave, stall walk, whatever. But even this horse right here, Bentley, he's been a stall walker since he was with his mom. He walked around his mom. And she was a calm, easygoing horse. She had no stress to promote to him, to cause him to think he's supposed to be nervous all the time. It's an absolute, in his case, it's an ADD thing. It's not a stress or an anxiety thing of being in the stall. Like, you don't put him in the stall and he runs around in circles because he's stressed about being in the stall. He goes around in circles because he's just bored or out of excitement. Sometimes, like, if it's time to go out, he'll just start, like, kind of blindly walking around. And the reason I know it's not an anxiety of the stall is, number one, he's standing there nice and quiet now. Number 2, I can tie him in the stall and he doesn't panic. And number 3, I've actually he does a pattern, so he tracks right. And as he's coming around one day, he came past the door, I went in the stall, went directly across to the far wall and stood there. And as he came around and met with me, I scared him. He had no idea I was in there with him and had an absolute, like, where'd you come from kind of thing. And that was because he was doing it in a, like somebody that taps their foot all the time, or somebody that, twirls their hair. It's that kind of self-soothing thing that he developed. How that started, I don't know. I've known him since he was a little baby, since he was like an hour old. I wasn't part of his pre-weaning care, but I was his after-weaning care, and he's done that since, he arrived. This particular breeder, I was pretty confident, didn't just pull them away from their mommies that day and throw them on the trailer and send them to us. The 2 of them came, and to his benefit, he came with his pasture mate. The 2 moms that we bought the babies from, come on, Bailey, move. She was under my feet. I was under your feet. I'm sorry, Mommy. I didn't mean to be under your feet. Come on, look out. Under my feet. A little too much this morning. So, I'm kind of like wondering what people's weaning processes are, and do they consider how much of the emotional trauma is being had or isn't being had? Is that being considered? I wonder, I think the most humane way to wean babies is to do it like these big breeding farms do, where there's, 10 to 20 mares out together with their babies, and then just mommies or babies get switched to a different spot on the farm with each other. They keep their friends. And they're also keeping somewhat of a routine. They're also staying in a familiar scent. They're in a familiar area that they recognize the smell of. Nothing else has changed other than, Mommy must have wandered off. Well, let's keep playing. I think a baby that's yanked away from its mom and thrown on a trailer and taken someplace new the day it's weaned is horrible. And I do think that shows up in the horse, long term. I do think that, it's a human decision when it's done that way. I think people don't want to hear the baby and the mom cry for each other for a couple days. I think that, it's some people think that that's more emotional damaging. I think that people do it because, or they're just, they no longer want to feed, because now they have to grain that baby, and they don't want to feed that baby, so they want to get rid of it the day it's no longer getting its nourishment from its mom. There's, I'm sure there's people that have that concept. I'm trying to think what other logical, somebody's been waiting for the baby to be weaned to get possession of it. So the day it's weaned, that's the perfect time to do that. Injury, I think that might be something that people consider. Mommy and baby doing whatever it takes to get back together, worried about, them hurting each other, or hurting themselves, impaling themselves on a fence or something like that. I can see all those kind of logical reasons, but my thought is, if you have a baby and you're not in a position to safely separate a mom and a baby at that time, maybe it's really not the position you should be in to make that decision. But that's my thoughts. Take them or leave them. I think, honestly, a lot of the young horses that already have self-soothing vices are a result of something to do with their weaning process.